And now for the world-ranking philosopher, Lakitu. Put your hands together. Yeah, thank you, that's plenty. That's plenty. That's good enough. This is Lakitu. I'm known as on the Philosophy RC chat rooms. I'm going to be doing some original philosophy of action for you. It's the original philosophy, I'd like to stress. For all you, I don't know how to classify you all, I don't know how to characterize you all in the philosophy chat rooms, but for all of you at the philosophy chat rooms, we'll be doing some philosophy of action here, along with some other stuff as I think of it. It's all original, except for where noted. Philosophy of action. And we will be using a tool I invented called scoping. I'll be demonstrating it. It's very visual. It's very diagrammatic. So we'll be using this visual tool on the board here. And I guess when I think of action, I think of the simplest case, say standing in a circle with my friends, and I think of something to do. I think of, I'm going to go grab cigarettes off the counter. I don't smoke actually, but say that's what, you think of something to do. Okay, and we're going to call that part of doing the creative process. And then once you've thought of what you're going to do, typically we just do it. And that falls somewhere down here that we'll call progress. And what you'll notice is that I'm going to be very general. I won't bring that up right here. I suppose I'll point it out later. Anyway, so we're trying to generalize from a model case of doing, which is where I was saying we're standing in a circle, thinking what to do, and we do it. And so we've got two parts of the process of doing, or action. Let's choose one of those words here. I suppose we'll go with action. Yeah, maybe doing or action is fine. So we've got two parts of the process of doing so far. Creating the idea, and then actually doing it or making progress on it. But what I'm going to caution you about is when you're making, this is not quite an analogy, but it's a comparison. A prototypical case is a comparison. We're comparing an example, a concrete example, to the generalities, the generalizations of them. So we're going from staying in a circle with your friends to and thinking of something to do, to the creative process, and from going over and grabbing your cigarettes to progressing or doing the actual thing. We call this doing. That's a typical sense of what we think of with doing. Maybe we could call the whole process action, and the actual doing. Sounds like I'm speaking Chinese or something there. But, what I'm going to caution against is making a comparison that is too simple in that way for a general process. What I'm going to be doing in this is something that's hopefully general enough for a politician, for someone running a country. So this will be a lot more involved of a philosophy of action than your average street kid philosophy of action that you need to get around with. It'll be a lot more powerful, a lot more heavy duty. So you'll be able to use it and actually have quite a strong philosophy of action. At least we're only doing one part, so this won't be a complete philosophy of action. It'd be good for you to know. But it's a start. So when you're doing a comparison, I can explain this a little bit. The reason why you don't want to use a simple comparison, you can probably think of it. There's not as much richness. Say if we're doing analogies, which is another form of comparison. One comparison we're doing, example, goes to generalities, to this level of generalization, or it goes to generalizations to this level of generality. Whereas an analogy does a comparison of sorts. You can think of it either way, as bouncing from one to the other, or just going directly across to make a comparison. I probably would think of it as more of going across. Okay, so another kind of comparison that's easier to work with is an analogy. And say if you're working with something like video games, there's not much to video games compared to life. Life has a billion things, a billion points to all of its economy is very robust. There's lots of depth and richness to economy, to cosmology, to human romance, I guess I should call it, not human romance. There's so much to everything in life. Video games are a lot more simple, they're a lot more mechanical, a lot more stick figure in a couple senses. Stick figure, but also like if you're going to make a sort of fake person out of sticks, like I always use my example on the philosophy chat rooms of why robots will never be conscious, because they're essentially, basically I think it's the Chinese room argument where you have a computer's understanding is really just repeating the words you've put into it. It's sort of like a scribe who looked up in a book something but wasn't able to. And that's actually the same example that Cyril uses. I'm really rediscovering what he discovered there. A computer is really just like a scribe who looked up something in a book you told him to on page 493, the 7th line, and repeated what was there, or showed you what was there, but he doesn't understand it. It doesn't say you understand it, but the scribe doesn't understand it, and that's really what a robot is like. It's like a scribe who doesn't understand, who's just repeating or giving some index card with an answer. So, and that's what I mean. That's, if someone came up to me in a tribe, is how I compare it, and said, you know, I've got this new stick figure I've made out of sticks, and I think he's going to be our new star tribes member, our new tribe member, new star tribesman. I'd say you're nuts. You are out of the tribe because you're crazy, and it's just basically how I feel about people who are trying to make conscious robots. It's not going to happen because they're just repeating words that they look up in lookup tables, basically, which is sort of a way to understand computation. But, so for that reason, video games, in the same way, video games are just sort of these simple mechanical models of life. And so when you're making a comparison, whether it be from examples to generalities, or you're going from an analogy, this is very important because analogies are very important. Analogies are very useful and very used, I should say. They're used in a lot of thinking. We use it all the time, so you should probably pay attention. This is a very general thing as far as, besides teaching and literature using analogies, we use analogies in our common thinking all the time, and the more the better, almost, is really how I think of analogies, because they're so useful. But I'm sure there's a limit to how much you can use them, but they really are very useful. And so when you're making an analogy or a comparison of generality or generalization, using a sparse example is not going to do you much good when you want something rich, and we always want something rich. We always want something deep. There's a lot of points to it. My friend Vortex on the Philosophy IRC Undernet chat room used to talk about a million ringing bells, little bells. I don't know how to explain exactly what it's what he thought of depth and I would say richness of meaning. It's like a million little bells ringing. Is how he put it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I really don't have an analysis of what depth is, but I know that richness in analogies is a lot more advantageous than sparseness or dryness. And what I mean by that is, I got to get my directions straight here. You don't want to make an analogy from life to video games. You don't want to understand the economy of life in terms of a video game economy. Say Final Fantasy I's economy, because it's so simple that you're not going to really learn. Although you can make 1 point that would make sense, or 2 points, maybe if you're lucky, you're really not going to understand a whole lot by understanding life's economy in terms of video games economy. You're not going to understand economy much deeper by looking at Final Fantasy's economy. So that direction doesn't work when you go from a richer, more complex thing, where complexity is of natural things and complicatedness is of human things, in my terminology. Complicatedness is of human things, like a book. You don't want to go from complexity, I suppose complication, to and understand it in terms of a sparser thing. Okay, so that's what we were starting to do. That's why I purposely went up the example, and I wanted to show you not to do that. When we were starting to go from the example of standing in a circle with your friends and thinking of, I want to go get a cigarette and things like that. It's overly simple for the philosophy of action. It's fine enough to think it, but we don't want to go from simple things to our finished product. What we want to do is go from something, the most complicated thing, the most complex thing, the most rich thing, and use that for our basis of generalization. Because it's going to give us a richer generalization. Okay, that makes pretty solid sense. There's more to it, so we're going to get more out of it. In our generalization, we're going to get more into our generalization. So, what's a very rich example? I have not taken the time to really invent one, but I'll try and work through one in real time here. Make one up on the fly. We'll see how that goes. Say if you're running a nation and you have just cut off aid to another nation, just something that just happened, and you feel that that's I guess something else we're going to do here is I'll show you how I record actions, and you wouldn't use it for something like, I'm going to go get cigarettes in the next second or 2 seconds off of the table. But for more complicated, more robust action, you would use a system like this. So I'll at the same time be showing you how I record actions individually for networking actions between people, for keeping track yourself, for basically having a system or written, or I guess a system for acting. I don't mean Hollywood acting here, so talking about real action. For example, this is the example we were going to get into here, was say you had cut off aid to a nation and you wanted to apologize to them because you felt you had done it wrongly, or you should have done some other action instead. Well, decision making at the national level, the international level, the global level, involves a lot of complexity. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of planning that goes involved. That goes into it. And it's very important, so we try to do it the best we can. It's really the peak of our performing, or some of the peak of our performing, besides, say, philosophy or art, poetry, music, acting in the Hollywood sense, and other things. it really is one of the high performances of life. So it's a good example to use because it will give us a great model to pick off generalizations from. So one thing I brought up already I want to talk about is planning. Once someone has thought of what to do, what I will say is there are not any tools, not many, but not any. So there are not any tools I have found for the creative process, which is where you generate an idea of what to do. Kind of like, what would be the general? I can't think of a general question for it, but there are not any tools I've come across for doing that, and that's what my tool does. Or helps you with. It's a tool for generating ideas of things to do. You'll see that scoping is actually broader. It can be used in other systems or areas. We're going to talk a little bit about systems of systems too. Not to burden you with too much information here. Too many ideas, but we'll be looking at systems of systems, how you make a system. I'll be encouraging you to generalize from my system to your own system, but I also will encourage you as an alternative, or no matter what, either way, to take on my system, especially some of the ways to act we'll be talking about. So as soon as I get these things come up on the things we're going to use, I'm documenting here. So I've got ways to act. And there will be a list here of ways to act. And I'll get into that as it comes up. Now, in world strategic planning, say you have used the value of justice. You have used justice to weigh that you should apologize for cutting off aid. And the specific example I'm talking about is cutting off aid to Egypt because of their military coup and their instability and how they're handling the instability in their nation. Their crowd control by the currently in power people. So you've already thought of it. We're not going to show this tool yet. Then there comes the planning of it. Now, planning, there are plenty of systems out there for how to plan. There's all kinds of things where you talk about cues for actions, the order of things to do them in, prioritizing, also I guess that's part of prioritizing what needs to be done first before something else. Skills, you're allocating people, which is related to skills. You're allocating money, you're allocating time, you're allocating tools. Those are limited. And you're also adapting to obstacles that arise during process. We're not going to deal with any of that because like I say, there are plenty of systems for planning. You can choose among them. You can plug one in to this philosophy of action. That's actually what I will be doing myself when I use this philosophy of action. So planning is taken care of. And if I ever come up with a system of planning, I'll let you know. But so we will not be doing planning, like I say. I hope that's not too much of a disappointment. But then what do you want to do? I guess it'd be a good time to bring up how I record actions and how I keep notes on actions, how I keep track of actions. When I think of something to do that is more long-term than go grab cigarettes off the counter, medium-term or long-term, I write what I'm going to do. Let's say this is a piece of paper here. I won't actually use this. I want to limit my space here. we're going to apologize, and this is for our example here, apologize to Egypt. Setting up aid. Hastily. Okay. And you can laugh at me if you want, but I actually use a input, so I'll do I draw perfect squares, perfect as I can, to symbolize that this action will be done perfectly. The time to dwell on doing the action perfectly. Proportionality, right angles. Doing the action perfectly. Okay? And so it's symbolic. It's not just a box. It's symbolizes doing the action perfectly. You know, perfect equal-sided right-angled triangle or square. If I can identify perfect equal-sided right-angled square. Okay, and this is actually our box for doing it. And then underneath, we record miscellaneous notes. Apologize specifically. I'm not saying necessarily we should do this. I'm disappointed that we cut off some aid or breaking some ties with Egypt. I'm a very big fan of Egypt because it's a historical civilization I'm a very big fan of. I think it's a great civilization I'm very in love with. That civilization, Akhenaten, Hespatid, Cleopatra. So I do not feel we should be severing ties. I do feel there should be something like a civilizational security, like we have social security. There's a little bit of politics or political theory, but a little bit of politics, but you should have civilizational security, where if you have a great civilization, you're covered for, you get some benefits for the later years of your, or the for later on. Just like you cover people who worked hard in life, you give them social security and retirement and give them social security. So underneath is the space for any miscellaneous notes you need about the action. All it is specifically to general. Or how about the people? Let's go with their. It's difficult because they have a military government type thing right now. Military government. Transitional gov. Say we should have sent diplomats. Like more diplomats. This our mistake, or lack of diplomacy. Now actually that is one of my 5-star ideas, key star ideas. Diplomacy is a huge, huge star value, and that is one of the ways to act. So a little like, if you've heard, we've said the word of the day here. Diplomacy will go into our ways to act. It's one of the ways to act, and I'll fill up the others as needed when the time comes. So far we've got our action here. We've in the perfect square of doing. Symbolize the perfection of the act. We've got what we're going to do here. We've got our notes about how to do it. And then what I do here is I use a system of reasons. I was reluctant to give away this system of how to do things because it's so powerful and so good, but I think it's very good. But it's in progress too. But so when you think of a reason to do it, you're walking around in your Oval Office and a news story is shown to you by one of your advisors, and it makes you think of a reason to do this. You know, you say, maybe you heard from someone, Egypt is a great civ, like I was talking about. It's a great civilization. Gets back to the idea of civilizational security, and like social security. Take care of these great civilizations. We don't want to lose their culture, and we want to preserve what we can of them. I don't think they're totally gone. I think there's a lot of, I don't know. That's not my area of expertise. But so when you have a reason to do it, put a check mark and you write the reason, and you also date it. It's like October 10th or something like that. It's really late. It's like 2 a.m. And then if you have, then you think of another reason to do it or not to do it. Okay. Now, say this is going to be unpopular. It actually wouldn't be an unpopular idea. I think Egypt is a key ally and wouldn't be unpopular. So say you're thinking for whatever reason, you read some article that's going to be unpopular, you write down a reason not to do it. And the calculation goes something like this. One reason to do it is it's optional to you, whether you want to act on one reason to do it or not. That's your choice of how you build your system. But any reasons to not do it, I don't do it. And if there are two reasons to do it, I do it, for sure. There's just a simple calculus that I come up with, or a simple calculation, a simple formula that I use in life. You can laugh at it if you like, but it's effective. It's a policy in me and Martin's phrasing of things. We have policies, personal policies on what to do. So you could adapt these policies to however. You might look for a 4-reason limit, and you might qualify the level of those reasons, or you might qualify certain thresholds for the level of those reasons, where one giant reason would be enough to do it, or 3 small reasons don't really add up to much. But you'd still record them and write and date them. And the reason you date them is because when you flip-flop, or if you flip-flop, hopefully you don't, but if you do, it happens, on whether to do it or not, you can trace back your thinking, and you can kind of remind yourself of that thinking. You might want to put notes even of where you got this reason from, which article, say, you read this in. And you can kind of relive that reasoning, and then you can sort out all of your reasons, all of your reasoning, about whether to do it or not, and have some sort of policy system. Like I say, I use 2 reasons for sure to do it. 1, it's kind of optional. What do I do for 1? 1 I tend to hold back on. I like to have 2 solid reasons to do, but 1 can be enough as well, depends on how small scale. It all depends, and you might want to have some policy, unlike computer programs. I've been comparing philosophies to computer programs a lot lately, where you give input, process it, and get output. You might, unlike computer programs, you might want to have some degree of variability, where you always have that manual override, which is key, where 1 reason could be enough, and so on and so forth, so that you're not a simple, you're not oversimplifying reasoning. And specifically by reasoning, I mean having reasons to do something and thinking about those reasons and processing to get a yes or a no. And so, say you overcome this unpopular thing, you come up with a way to make it so you won't feel that you're being unpopular. You'll make statements about Egypt's grandness as a way to negate this reason not to. So you take that off, and you also date. So we had October 10th, 2 a.m. for this one. We're also going to date when we cross this off. We're going to do a live X to it. 2 a.m., 2:10. And you could even give the reason that you crossed it off. You know, here. So you have a full sort of playbook, or play, like in a football play, of the reasoning. You're able to trace this back. If you understand your symbolism, you just have a symbolism that works for you. That's really the key, something you can remember. And when you introduce new symbolism, I use this symbolism to introduce new symbolism. This is the symbol for symbols. And say we're going to have the defining symbol. The symbol of defining, a new symbol, would be this symbol here. The 3 lines. Means you're defining something. I just put that over on the margin so I can keep track of my symbolisms. And I'm never at a loss. I can always, at worst case, trace back a few pages or find it eventually. If you have scribes, it's a lot better. If you have people who work for you, you can go and find it. But so check my camera, it's been turning off on me here. So you have all this symbolism to do it. The square of doing, the check marks of reasons, check marks of reason here, the reason, X's, reason not to, miscellaneous notes, anything you need underneath in order to do this action. And when you finally have got, you feel it to go, I put a check mark next to the thing to do it, tell me to do it. And then we move into progress. We move to actually doing the thing. And I think a good model of doing is playing sports. That's very performative. You kind of get in the zone. Kind of being a machine is one way. I believe Dreyfus put it in his lectures on being in time. Hitting them like a machine, kind of matching up your intuition with your doing. And there probably is a performative aspect to it's kind of a performance to do politics, but mostly you're performing will probably be composing the missive you're going to send, the transmission you're going to send to, or the message you're going to send. There isn't a whole lot of that physical performing, but I think it's still a good model for actually doing, in the zone, and actually, so the doing would be on your own time writing something, and despite what people think, like with a million monkeys on a keyboard, you actually can't compose something great just because you have an hour to do it, or 2 hours, or a day. There is a lot of doing to it, and so that is a different module. That is a different thing. A different part of the system of doing here, or the process of action. The thinking of what to do, planning it out, and then doing it here. And I do not have anything to say on the doing other than what I have said. I've not worked up something on that yet, and when I do, that will be a different lecture. It'll be very interesting. I'll get into sports players doing, I'll get into musicians doing, I'll get into compositional doing, you're riding a wave, checking contexts, very far back, a minute and a half into music to write and perform into a composition, according to composition. But we won't be doing that here now, for suffice to say, you do it according to your plan, and you do adapting. There's some interplay here between doing and then remaking your plan. You plan what to do, and then you adapt to your circumstances. Say, I suppose this is a one-step thing, kind of doing this apologization. But if you had a multi-step thing or a process, things can change in the middle of it where you have to adapt. or you have to change the circumstances or the situation that's to make it adapt to you. So there's that, and then then you do it, and then by symbolism, you've done it. You have a log of why you did it. Okay. That's very huge if you're doing some kind of diplomacy or government. Okay, diplomacy. Remember, I'll make my word of the day. Talking chair. Diplomacy. We said diplomacy. So that's one of the 5 ways to act in my philosophy. Action. Ways to act. I'm sorry. I didn't say that. And then after you do it, it's finished. I don't know if I necessarily need this step here. You sort of bask in it, that kind of thing, absorb it. And then there's a review process where you can find, there's a step I skipped. I guess the review process where you look at the effects from it, the long-term effects, or the short-term, middle-term, long-term effects. And you're seeing what you could have done better throughout the whole process. And you can generalize and learn from what you've done here and develop what I call understandings. Now, understandings fit into a different module here. I can use that linear nasal word module as a part of the system. You can plug into other systems freely. And this module I call knowledge. And the word of the day that we mentioned in this module was understandings. About here. So you could glean understandings when you look at the long-term effects of what happened or how people reacted. You can understand them deeper, understand the actions deeper, understand yourself deeper, understand the principle of diplomacy, or the way to act of diplomacy better, the way of diplomacy better, the way of being diplomatic better. And I'll give you an example, because I have one, of having an understanding, which I record this way, of diplomacy. I make sort of a HTML style tag. Now imagine this is a separate piece of paper thing here.